Hey guys, Erica here from Highway 49 RC. Thank you so much to my patrons and my channel members for supporting the channel and making what I do possible. Welcome back to episode 3 of the belly dragger build. Last time we worked on getting the whole rig mocked up, getting links made, getting the suspension kind of figured out. Today we're moving on to driveshafts and shocks. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Alright, my beloved MIP driveshafts have shown up. Now with some shafts, MIP sends different length yokes. I'm not sure what they're really called, but for reference, they are these little short bits that go on the ends of the drive shaft, right? And because they send different length ones, you can really fine tune the length of your shaft. So because the one drive shaft was on the top end of the one range and kind of on the bottom end of the other, I'll be able to kind of fine tune the length with the different length yokes to get a perfect fit. So I'm going to go ahead and get these all slammed together, get them in the rig, figure out what lengths they need to be, and then we'll move on to shocks. Okay, drive shafts have been installed. I was able to get everything situated just how it needs to be. Got the right length yokes on there where they need to be and all that. I'm gonna need to clock my rear axle forward a little bit. So I'll end up making another set of upper links for it. But for now, this will be fine. And I had to play some games here with this yoke to get it to fit on the transfer case. I went and took it to my lathe and I had to turn it down, and as you can see, it does clear. You can see daylight through there. Yeah, absolutely redonkulous, but it works. I had to grind down one of the set screws because otherwise the heads of the set screws would touch each other. It was a whole thing, but it turned out pretty good in the end. And there's my main shaft as well. Now let's address these goofy looking shocks. Erica, what the heck? What is this? Well, it is a Frankenstein shock, as I will call it. It's got parts on it from 4 different manufacturers. It's got G-made shock bodies. It's got Proline primary stage springs. It's got Losi Mini T front springs. And an axial shock shaft. Yes, it is absolutely ridiculous. And to make these shocks, it actually takes 4 to make 2. Yeah, because I had to take 2 spring cups and turn them down into this component and that component. So I've got a nice little mini spring cup there for my Losi Mini T spring. And then I've got a stage separator plate, or retainer, I guess you could call it, right here in the middle. And it functions really good. The reason I'm using axial shock shafts is because they are slightly longer, because I do lose a bit of travel in here with the fully compressed springs and the stage separator. Here's a look at the shock all taken apart. Now these 2 pieces were both made out of this aluminum spring cup. So as you can see, there is some resemblance going on there with this piece. And this one is basically like the hole in the bottom for the rod end. And then I took the rest of it and machined a shoulder onto it to support the spring. Now the really nice thing is that I've got 3 different rates of the Mini T springs and 4 different rates of the Proline springs. So in total, I can get 12 different combinations of dual rate shock setup, which is pretty awesome. On the shock shaft, I ground down the nut and the end of the shaft so that I would get the maximum amount of travel without there being any sort of bottoming out nonsense. And if I take the nut on here off, I had to make an aluminum collar to adapt the piston inner diameter to the shock shaft diameter, as you can see there. The other part that I had to machine was this little collar here. This slides over the shock body, basically to adapt down to the Proline spring. Could I have just flipped this upside down? Yes, but by having a separate collar, I can get a little bit more adjustability out of it, but I can also add a third stage if I want to, which is kind of wild to have a 3-stage shock, but it would work in theory. There's also some longer Proline springs that I can use instead of this one. So I can run a mini T spring and a longer Proline spring as well, if I want. Basically, there's a ton of different setups for these shocks that I have created, and it's going to be awesome. So, since it takes a full set of 4 shocks to make 2 of these Frankenstein shocks, I got another set of 104mm G-Made Zero shocks. Of course, I went with the red shock bodies for them, so I'm going to swap out these shock bodies for the red ones, and I'll take the spring cups out of this set and machine them down to make another set of Frankenstein shocks. Alright folks, I am done machining all of my spring cups down into my Losi Mini T spring perches and my spring adapters / separators. I also turned the threads out of a couple more of these collars, and I made a couple shock shaft piston adapters. Those things are so small. So the way that those work is they go on the end of the shock shaft right there, on top of an E-clip, and then the piston sits on top of that. So I'm gonna give you guys a quick assembly here. So I've got my shock shaft. This is my axial shock shaft with the aluminum adapter on there because the threaded portion is smaller than the inside diameter of the shock piston. And then there's an E-clip on there. So we'll go ahead and stick our shock piston on there. I'm using the 3-hole pistons. This might be tricky. It's a very, very tight fit. Okay, I got my piston on there, and I'm going to take a nut and thread that on. I did grind down the ends of the shock shafts and the nuts so that they're extra low profile, so we get the maximum amount of suspension travel inside the shock body. I'm now going to build up a seal cartridge. I've got 2 pre-slimed O-rings that are going to go in there with a spacer in between. And then it's going to get a cap to go on top of there to keep the O-rings and spacer in there, and that just clips on pretty much. Then I can slip my shock shaft through the seal cartridge there, just like that. The G-Made and the axial shock shafts are the same diameter, so I won't have to worry about them leaking or anything. I can now go ahead and put this assembly into my shock body. With oil, of course, I will do that off camera because it's messy. We don't like doing messy things on camera. I've gone ahead and threaded my adjustment collar all the way down to the base of the shock body. I'm then going to grab one of the collars that I took the threads out of and put it on there opposing like that. And then I can put my secondary rate spring on there. This is a Proline Power Stroke spring. This is the green one, which is the softest that they make for the Proline Power Stroke shocks. Then I'm going to put a spring separator on there. And then I'm going to do a medium Losi Mini T spring. And then my small spring cup will go on there. And then lastly, a rod end, of course, goes on the bottom. And with that, that is my Erica Special dual rate shock fully assembled. I'm going to get the rest of these put together, fill them up with oil, and we'll keep going. Here are my completed shocks. They turned out pretty nice. As I was building them, I realized that I actually bought the wrong length. So the shock bodies are like 3 or 4 millimeters longer than the silver ones that I had earlier. Is that a problem? No, not really. Just kind of annoying, and it makes the whole shock a little bit longer. It doesn't really affect my travel at all because I'm using the axial shock shafts, but it might make them a slight bit harder to mount up the way I want them. But I do have these lowering brackets from CKRC from years and years and years ago that I can use to augment the locations of these shocks. I'm going to work on getting these mounted up. I am going to have to probably play some games with the trailing arms because I need to drill some new holes in them to mount the shocks. I might end up welding the existing holes shut and then re-drilling new ones. I mean, I'm going to have to drill new ones regardless, but I may weld the old ones closed just so I can like properly position the holes that I need. We'll kind of have to see. I'm also probably going to whip up a set of rear upper links to clock my axle forward a little bit and give a more aggressive bend to this link so that it clears the drive shaft a little bit better. But having the axle clocked forward will also help with this interference issue. So we'll kind of have to see, but I'm probably going to work on that as well. So I got my shocks installed, and the rear end of this rig has turned into an erector set. I've got adapter plates and spacers and connecting bars all over the place, but we actually have a decently functioning rear suspension, so that's pretty sweet. I did not end up making new rear upper links, but I'm probably going to end up doing that in the future at some point once these bend, if they bend. If these work great, then awesome, I won't have to, but yeah, the rear end is a little ridiculous, but hey, it works, alright? I think that's probably a good place to call today's episode. We didn't make a ton of like major progress, but we got some really important stuff done. Drive shafts and shocks, getting the shocks put on and positioned properly. And you guys get a little sneak peek of the rig just over there. Oh yeah. So, I hope you guys have enjoyed. If you did, please do leave a big fat thumbs up if this does happen to be the first episode that you have seen by me. Make sure you go down, hit that subscribe button to find the rest. If you want to catch up with me outside of YouTube, head over to my Instagram at highway49_RC. If you want to chat with fellow RC crawler enthusiasts, head over to my Discord server. And if you want to support me and the channel, consider becoming a channel member or joining my Patreon. Links are in the description, guys. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will see y'all in the next one.